The cataloging was supposed to be boring. That was the thing Varath 6 kept coming back to, later, when people asked how it all started. The Dominion assigned its junior survey officers to the outer scatter specifically because nothing happened there. You flew your grid, you logged debris fields, you ate your ration packs alone at a fold-out table, and you submitted your reports to a server that probably nobody read. Varath 6 had done this for 8 standard cycles. He was good at boring. He was eating cold Thresk food, which smelled exactly like something had died inside something else that had also died, when his proximity alert sang its flat little tone. He didn't even look up immediately. Rocks pinged the sensor all the time out here. He spooned another mouthful, grimaced at the texture, and then looked. The object was not a rock. It was approximately 40 meters long, tumbling slow as a sleeping thing through the dark. Hull plating the color of old iron. A drive assembly that Varath 6 had never seen the configuration of, not in 8 cycles of survey work, not in the archives at the Academy. No running lights, no transponder signal. The object was, by every reading his instruments could give him, completely dead. He put down his food. He pulled up the registry. He cross-referenced. He cross-referenced again. Nothing matched. Varath 6 sat with that for a moment. Then he did the thing that junior survey officers were specifically trained not to do, which was to go in for a closer look before calling it in. He told himself it was due diligence. The docking clamp took 4 tries to seal properly because one of his secondary manipulators had been glitching since Outpost Drev, and the maintenance cycle wasn't scheduled for another 12 days. By the time the connection held, Varath 6's secondary arms were sore from the manual override, and he was in a worse mood than usual, which was saying something. The airlock on the dead ship was a manual crank design. He stood there studying it for a full minute. Whoever built this thing had clearly decided that redundancy mattered more than elegance. He counted 3 separate locking mechanisms, 2 pressure gauges, a wheel valve, and what appeared to be a handwritten note in a script he didn't recognize laminated to the wall beside the handle. He photographed everything. Then he cranked the wheel. The smell hit him first. Something metallic, and under it something organic and stale, and under that, faint but unmistakable, the sharp chemical signature of emergency oxygen generation. Still running. Something on this ship was still running. He should have called it in then. He went inside instead. The interior lights were dead, but emergency phosphorescent strips ran along the floor seams, casting everything in pale blue-green. The corridor was narrow by Dominion standards, built for a bipedal species, clearly, 2 legs, 2 primary arms, moderate height. The walls had handholds at regular intervals. There were personal items clipped to some of them. A small framed image, a pair of thin fabric gloves, a container with a lid and a stylized drawing on the side that might have been an animal of some kind. Varath 6 moved slowly, touching nothing. The ship had 14 compartments. He cataloged each one on his recorder without opening anything. The crew quarters, 4 of them, small, had personal effects, sleeping areas, a common space with a fixed table and, inexplicably, a wall covered in small paper rectangles, each covered in that same unrecognized script. One had a drawing of what seemed to be a landscape. Another had a drawing of a face, simple, 2 eyes and a curved line that might be a smile. He was in the engine compartment when he heard the sound. It was very faint, a kind of low, rhythmic. The closest word he had was thrum, but slower than that, more like something breathing. He stood completely still for a full minute. Then he followed the sound. The medical bay was behind a door marked with a symbol he didn't know. A cross shape, simple, red. And inside it was warm. Noticeably, specifically warm, in a way the rest of the ship wasn't. The air recyclers were louder here. Along one wall, 4 long units ran in a row, and 3 of them were dark and cold. But the fourth had a faint amber light on its panel, and a misting of condensation on the transparent cover, and inside it, a person. Female, he thought, based on the softer skeletal structure visible at jaw and temple. Approximately 1.65 meters, 2 arms, 2 legs, bilateral symmetry, all as the corridor had suggested. The skin was a warm medium brown. The hair, he didn't have a good word for the color, something between dark amber and soil, had been cut short but had grown out unevenly, suggesting she had been in the unit for a long time. The panel read, in symbols he had to translate slowly, Cryopreservation. Emergency revival. Manual only. Below that, a strip of tape. On the tape, handwritten in the same script as everything else on the ship. He photographed it. He ran it through his translation module. The module thought for a moment and then produced, "Do not open. If you are reading this, it is not safe yet." Varath 6 stood there in the warm amber light, listening to the slow thrumming of the cryo unit and thought, well. He called it in. The retrieval team arrived in 14 hours, which was fast enough to mean that someone higher up had made some decisions very quickly. Commander Thal Prime came herself, which almost never happened for survey finds, and she had 3 science officers with her and a medical specialist named Oru, who immediately pushed past everyone to crouch in front of the cryo unit and start scanning. "Don't open it," Varath 6 said. Everyone looked at him. "There was a note," he said. He showed them the translation. "I think we should try to understand the situation before we—" "Junior Surveyor," Commander Thal Prime said, in the tone she reserved for explaining things to people who were being professionally inconvenient. "The unit is at 92% capacity. If we don't initiate revival in the next—" "I know." He did know. He'd done the math already. He'd been doing the math since he found her. "I'm just saying. The note was deliberate. Someone hid this ship out here, and they hid her in it, and they left a warning. That means something." Oru looked up from her scanner. "He's not wrong about the timeline." Thal Prime looked at the unit. She looked at the note translation. She made the expression that Varath 6 privately called her, "This is more complicated than my morning looked," face. "Proceed with revival," she said. Carefully. Her name, they eventually figured out, was Jian. It was written on a tag inside her jacket. Ko Jian, it said, and a number, and a word that the translator rendered as engineer. And it was also among the documents in her quarters in various forms. The full version appeared to be Ko Jian, but there was a shorter form in some documents that seemed to be used by people close to her. They couldn't be certain which to use. Varath 6 had spent an embarrassingly long time on this particular question. The revival took 3 days. The first day she was unconscious. The second day she was conscious but incoherent, kept saying things the translator couldn't process, words that seemed to be names. The third day she opened her eyes, looked at Oru's scanner hovering over her face, and said very clearly, "Oh. Oh no." "You're safe," Oru said. "Do you understand me? I understand you." Her voice was rough. She swallowed. How long was I?" She stopped, closed her eyes, opened them again. "The ship. Chamsuri, where is it?" "The vessel you were found on? Where is it?" "It's secured to one of our cargo bays. We've preserved everything as found." Something in her face changed. Not relief, exactly. More like someone who has been bracing for a terrible answer and got a merely bad one instead. "How long?" she asked. Oru told her. Jian was quiet for a long time. 11 years, she said finally, as if testing the weight of it. "Do you want to?" "Not yet." She looked at the ceiling. "Not yet. I need to. Can you give me a minute?" They gave her a minute. Varath 6, who had no official reason to be there and had been standing in the doorway trying to look like he was reviewing his incident report, watched her take 11 years of silence and fold it down into something small enough to carry, and thought that this was either the most controlled person he had ever seen or the most frightened, and couldn't yet tell which. The communications problem took 6 days to partially solve and another 4 to mostly solve, and during that time Jian ate everything offered to her with the focused determination of someone who had decided to approach the situation practically or die trying. She had opinions about the food. She communicated these opinions through expressions rather than words because she was still learning the spoken forms, but Oru started keeping a log of the faces, and it became something of a game for the medical staff. Varath 6 brought her food on the 3rd day. He didn't know why. He'd been assigned to the case as a finder's record keeper, which meant he had standing to be present for interviews, but there was no official reason to bring food. He brought it anyway. She was sitting up in the medical bay, working through a translated vocabulary list, and she looked up when he came in and studied him the way she studied everything, carefully, without letting her reaction show. "You found me," she said. Her Dominion common was functional but accented in a way that made every sentence sound slightly like a question. "Yes." You didn't open the unit when you first found it. No. She thought about that. Why not? The note said not to. Something shifted in her face, not quite a smile, too tired for that, too careful, but something adjacent. Most people, she said slowly, working out the words, would think the note was... She made a gesture that the translator flagged as dismissible, irrelevant. The person who wrote it knew something I didn't, Varath 6 said. It seemed worth respecting that. She looked at him for a moment. Then she took the food he was holding and said, in what he would later learn was her own language, something that his translator rendered as thank you, with the notation that the specific form was informal, used between people who know each other. He filed that detail away and wasn't entirely sure why. The story came out in pieces, not because she was evasive, she wasn't particularly, but because it was complicated and the language was imperfect, and some of it she clearly hadn't talked about with anyone in 11 years of frozen silence. Chamsuri was, had been, a deep survey vessel from a civilization that called itself Ingangyul, which translated roughly as peoplekind, or possibly the human species, depending on which specialist you asked. Earth, a planet in a system that the Dominion had charted as uninhabited, which explained several things and raised many more questions they had been hiding. That was the short version. Chamsuri had gone deep into the outer scatter on a mapping mission and found something it wasn't supposed to find, an installation, old, belonging to a species the Dominion knew as the Shred, which was a translation of a much older word meaning approximately the ones who came before and left things behind. The installation had been active. Jion's crew had broadcast a general warning on emergency frequencies and then made the decision to run. The installation had come after them. We disabled the ship, Jion said. Everything. Transponder, drive signature, heat profile. Everything we could turn off, we turned off. She was talking faster now, more fluent with each session. Chungsam, the captain, she thought if we went cold and went deep, we could hide long enough for someone to get the warning. And then... She stopped, picked at the edge of her blanket, a small nervous habit Varath 6 had noticed she had. She put me in the unit. She said one person needed to stay, to explain, if anyone ever found us. And the others? She was quiet. Jion. They didn't make it, she said. Flat. Final. The voice of someone who has had 11 years to reach the place where they can say it flatly. The unit, the cryo unit, there was only enough capacity for one. Chungsam made the call. A breath. She was always making calls I didn't agree with. Varath 6 didn't say anything. He'd learned that she didn't want comfort so much as she wanted someone to stay in the room with her while she said the hard things. She left the note, Jion added. The note on the unit. She wrote it. Small pause. Not safe yet. That was Chungsam. Cautious about everything except herself. The Shred installation became a crisis very quickly. The Dominion High Command, which had been receiving Varath 6's incident reports with increasing frequency and intensity, dispatched a full fleet response in 18 days. There were meetings that Jion was not technically permitted to attend, but somehow always ended up in. She had a quality, Varath 6 observed it repeatedly, of simply being present in rooms until people forgot she hadn't been invited. Your species is unknown to us, Commander Thal Prime told her in the third such meeting. Your homeworld coordinates are not something I'm giving you right now, Jion said pleasantly. The room got quiet. I mean no disrespect. She didn't look disrespectful. She looked calm and tired and very certain. But I went to sleep in a situation where the people I trusted had just been killed. I woke up 11 years later in an alien ship. I'm still working out who's trustworthy. That's reasonable, Varath 6 said. Thal Prime looked at him. It's reasonable, he said again. She's cooperating. She gave us the warning about the installation. She's here. He paused. She'll tell us more when she trusts us more. Pushing won't make that faster. There was a silence that had several different people in it making different calculations. Then Thal Prime said, Fine, proceed. After the meeting, Jion found him in the corridor. She looked at him for a moment. You don't do that for everyone, she said. No. Why for me? He thought about it. You came to a fair decision with the information you had, he said. That seems like the kind of thing that should be defended. She nodded slowly. She was close enough that he noticed she smelled faintly of the calibration solvent she'd been using to work on Chamsuri's secondary systems, which she had started doing because she couldn't sleep and needed something to do with her hands. He knew this because he checked on her, sometimes, in the early ship hours when the corridors were quiet and she was usually in the cargo bay, methodically fixing things that he wasn't sure needed fixing. "You check on me," she said, as if she had followed his thought. "At night. You're often awake. So are you." He didn't have a good answer for that. "I'm not—" She stopped, started again. "I don't know how to do this, any of this. I keep waiting to feel scared." She pushed her hair back. It had grown further, past her ears now, curling slightly at the ends in the dry ship air. "I'm not, really. Isn't that strange? Maybe you used all your fear up already." Something surprised and genuine crossed her face. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe, I don't know. Some things are easier to face when you're not alone." She went back to the cargo bay. He stood in the corridor for a moment and then walked in the other direction toward the observation deck, where the stars were very dense and very cold and entirely indifferent to the strange, warm thing that was becoming complicated in his chest. The battle with the Shred installation. It was a ship, they discovered, not a facility, something ancient and self-directed and deeply unhappy about being found, lasted 11 hours. Jian spent the first 3 in the medical bay because that was where Thal Prime had told her to go, and the next 8 in auxiliary control because she had, quietly, made herself necessary to the sensor team, who had learned that she had a specific instinct for identifying Shred energy signatures that none of their specialists could match. Varath 6 was on damage control. A conduit blew 2 decks up, and he got a gash along his secondary arm that bled more than it hurt, and then hurt much more than it had any right to once the adrenaline left. He was wrapping it badly when Jian appeared around the corner with a medical kit and an expression of professional exasperation. "You're making it worse," she said. "I'm fine." "You're making it worse," she said again, and took the bandage from him and redid it properly, her hands quick and certain. She'd had emergency medical training, she'd mentioned once. Engineers always did, on deep survey. You couldn't count on the medic being conscious. The ship shuddered. They both grabbed for handholds without thinking about it, and when the shudder passed, she hadn't let go of his arm, and he hadn't moved. They stayed like that for a moment. "Varath," she said. She'd dropped the 6 in the last week, he'd noticed. He hadn't corrected it. "We're going to be fine," he said. "I know." She looked at the wrapped arm, at him. "I know, she exhaled. "I'm tired of losing people. I'm very tired of it." He turned his arm so that his hand covered hers. He didn't know, exactly, what the gesture meant in her language. He knew what it meant in his. Something like, "I'm still here. I intend to stay here." She looked at their hands. Her fingers tightened. "Your species," she said quietly. How do you—" She was frustrated with the language. She made a gesture that had no translation, but whose meaning was obvious enough. "Slowly," he said. "We do it slowly." "Good." She didn't pull away. "I think I can do slowly." The installation was destroyed. The Dominion logged it as a Category 7 Shred incident, the first confirmed active site in 600 years, and the report ran to 30,000 words and cited Jian's sensor readings 14 times. She was in the report as Independent Specialist, Origin Undisclosed, which she found funny in a dry, private way that Varath 6 had come to recognize as one of her forms of happiness. Chamsuri took another 2 months to get fully functional. She worked on it every day. He helped, when he had hours to spare, though she was better at it than he was, and they both knew it. She taught him the names of the components in her language, making him repeat them until his pronunciation was acceptable, and she laughed at his early attempts in a way that was not mean, but was definitely not polite, and he found he didn't mind. "What does it mean?" he asked once. "The name on the hull. Chamsuri." She was quiet for a moment. "A kind of bird," she said. "From home, small, very fast." She ran her hand along the hull. Chungsam chose it. She liked the idea of a tiny thing going very far and very fast and coming home. He watched her hand on the hull. "I'd like to see your home," he said. She looked at him. The cargo bay was warm, The kind of warmth that came from both of them working for hours, and she had engine grease on her jaw that she didn't know about, and she looked at him with something very careful and very open at the same time. That would mean telling you where it is, she said. Yes. You'd be the first. I know. She turned back to the hull, ran her thumb over a rivet. He waited. Ji-eun, he had learned, made decisions at her own speed, and pressure didn't change that, only entrenched it. He could wait. There's a season, she said finally, when the flowers bloom on the mountain near where I grew up. It's only a few weeks. My grandmother used to take me. She paused. I've been in space most of my adult life. I haven't seen it in a long time. What's it like? Pink, she said, and cold still, in the mornings. Everything smells like cold and something sweet. She glanced at him sidelong. I was thinking I might go back, eventually, to see it. That sounds, he said carefully, like something worth traveling a long distance for. The corner of her mouth moved. Small. Real. It does, doesn't it? She handed him a calibration tool. He took it. Their fingers touched, briefly, and neither of them made anything of it, which was its own kind of thing entirely. Outside the cargo bay windows, the stars were the same stars they'd always been. But they looked, somehow, like they were going somewhere. The Chamsuri hummed around them, repaired and patient and ready. And Varath 6 thought that the note on the cryo unit had been right in the end. Not safe yet, but now, finally, maybe it was. He thought Chung Sum would have approved. He got back to work.